Hello everybody, welcome to the 60-second IEP Live Learn Lunch. We're excited today to be joined by Heather from RNIB, who will be looking at, it's the fourth in our series of Seeing Opportunity webinars, and today we're going to be focusing on supporting people who have sight loss with interviews, and specifically virtual interviews, which is a challenge for all of us. So with no further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Heather, but what I would encourage you to do throughout the session is to use the chat to share your thoughts and experiences with myself and Heather and the rest of the group. We will be asking you some questions as we go through, so do make sure you're getting involved in those sessions. We will have a Q&A at the end, so if you do have any questions that you would like Heather to answer, please do pop them in the chat and I'll make sure she has an opportunity to answer them. So welcome Heather, and over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen. And Helen and I were talking earlier about the deliveries we're expecting and just hoping that they don't both come at once. If they do and we both disappear, we won't be long. So thank you everybody for joining us today. And as Helen said, we've called this series of webinars RNIB Seeing Opportunities. And today we're looking at the topic of being ready for interview and, in particular, virtual interviews. So I'm sure we've all got lots of experience of, doing sort of like online webinars and online, team meetings and the like, remote interviews and what have you. But today we're specifically looking at making sure that these interviews, job interviews, are accessible for candidates who have sight loss. Oh, somebody's first ever Zoom session. Okay, well, we will try and make sure, Kirsty, that it doesn't go wrong. So as I'm sure you don't need me to tell you, but the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting restrictions has created lots and lots of challenges for everybody in lots of different ways. And I think particularly for recruitment, both for employers and for the candidates, applicants as well. As we know, most of our non-essential workers, shall we say, have been working remotely, and most communications have now become virtual as well. So employers are having to follow along with that and shift their hiring processes and their expectations of how that's going to be done. So that's just kind of like the general sort of view, but how can we make sure that this is done for our clients with sight loss? How can we make sure that interviews are carried out with inclusion in mind? And particularly for today, how can we make sure that our clients with sight loss are able to participate fully in online and virtual job interviews? So Helen, if we could move on to the next slide, thank you so much. So we're probably recognizing some of these little logos here. So because of social distancing and the restrictions on travel, your client may be asked to attend a virtual interview for a job via a video conferencing link or by telephone. So they might be asked to join using a platform such as Skype, which we have here. There's Microsoft Teams, there's Zoom, as we're using today, Blue Jeans, which I've never used, but seems to be popular, Google Hangouts, WebEx, so on. There's probably many, many more. And of course, these types of virtual interviews, they should really just be treated in exactly the same way as you would a face-to-face interview, and the same etiquette would apply for your client being part of this. So I suppose that the main difference really is that, your client's attending an interview, but they're doing it from home. So today we're just going to look at how you would prepare your client who has sight loss for this interview, and things that you and they might need to think about because it's being done by video and remotely. So I just wondered if, just to kind of keep people involved here, could we maybe put some comments in the chat facility and maybe think of, any ideas or thoughts or concerns of, what might happen, what do you need to consider if you're advising your client about attending a virtual interview? So does anyone want to offer things that you might think that you would perhaps need to think about in relation to a client with sight loss? Okay.
Just give them a moment to get those fingers typing away. Here we go. Libby says ideal camera position.
Yeah.
Julie says position of the device. Bryony says logging in.
Yeah.
Is another thing to think about that can be a challenge. Julie says lighting.
Yeah.
Kirsty's saying navigating their way around the platforms, because of course all the platforms are different, aren't they?
Of course, yeah. Yeah, so do you know, some absolutely excellent suggestions, which are great because that's exactly what I plan to talk about today. So I'm glad it's not something completely different. I'd have to, using a new platform, which is, I think it's difficult enough, you know, for somebody who's fully sighted if you're not used to something, but, you know, throw in sight loss as well, and it could be a particular challenge. So, so yeah, thanks guys for the suggestions and the comments there. So Helen, if we could move on to the practice session, definitely. So the invitation to the interview. So as you know, you probably know the invite to an interview, it might come in the form of a letter or a telephone call or quite often an email. And your client will be advised that they've been selected for interview, and they'll be given the details of the interview, you know, including the time and the date. And as it's being carried out remotely, the employer would, you know, confirm in their correspondence how they plan to contact your client. So if it's a telephone number, obviously they would need a telephone number for your client. And if it was going to be done by video call, they'll send your client an email with a calendar invitation, or they might send a link, you know, to the to join, as we have today for this webinar. So, you know, they would include the date and the time and which video platform they plan to use, whether it's Teams, Skype, WebEx or whatever. And of course, it's always important for your client to confirm that they will be attending, the same as they would if it was a face-to-face interview. So that's the interview, the invitation to the interview. So if we move on to the next slide, please, Helen. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, this was something that a couple of people commented earlier in the chat about the technology side of things. So, you know, to attend a video interview, your client is going to have to make sure that they have access to a device, a supported device that has a functional camera and a microphone. So that could be a computer, it could be a tablet or a laptop or a mobile phone. So, you know, they will need to check the functionality of their particular device. So really, you know, for anyone, we'd be looking at, does the camera and the microphone work? And also, have they got an internet connection? And importantly, how reliable is their internet connection? So moving on a bit more to the sight loss specific side of things, we would also be looking then at, you know, has the client got access to the platform that the employer would like to interview them by? They might be used to using Zoom, but this particular employer wants to use Teams. So do they have access to that? Is it accessible for them? Do they need to download an app to use it? And can they do that? Or if not, do they have somebody that could perhaps help them, you know, assist them to download the app and get that set up? So I suppose a question you would ask yourself is what to do if your client with sight loss can't access video conferencing. They just don't have the means, or they're not able to do it for some reason. So I think at this point, this is something that I've suggested to someone, is to ask if they could have the interview conducted in a telephone call instead, as an alternative to video conferencing. And I think it's worth remembering that that could be considered a reasonable adjustment to the interview process. You know, this whole setup's still quite new for us all, and we've kind of been thrown in at it, really, haven't we? So, you know, somebody may need someone to actually just help them set that up because of their vision, and they may not have anyone there to do it. We can't just invite somebody around to help us. So, you know, I think it's certainly in those types of situations, it's okay to ask, could the interview be conducted by telephone as an adjustment, because I'm not able to do that at the moment. Another way perhaps of helping with this, and this really depends, I suppose, on which part of the country that you're in, because you know, easements on restrictions are different in different parts of the UK. So depending on where you are, there might be the option of your client doing the interview from your office if you're able to do that. So that way you could help them with their technology setup and make sure that everything's accessible for them. So perhaps that could be a way of supporting someone if they're having difficulty in accessing video conferencing. And if that is something that you're doing and you need some help, you know, around this type of thing, RNIB have a fact sheet about video conferencing, and it talks about accessibility and, you know, how you might help if it's yourself or if it's one of your clients around accessibility of video calls. So there's lots of hints and tips on it, and that's available on our website. And I think to remember as well that if anybody needs any further support or help with this, you can contact our Technology for Life team by calling our helpline, and I'll be giving out the helpline details at the end of the talk today. So yep, there's reasonable adjustments that we could ask to be put in place for our client should that be something that they need. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, please, Helen. Okay, so preparing for the interview. Now, I've got a lot of things on here, so I wasn't sure whether to divide this into different slides, but I've just grouped it all together in the end. So yeah, initially your client's going to need a quiet space where they won't be interrupted by Amazon deliveries like I'm expecting today. But they might also need to alert people that they live with that they have the interview, to ask them to keep any noise to a minimum throughout the duration of the interview. And you might also remind your client to make sure there's no background noise, such as televisions, washing machines, what have you. And again, these things would just apply to anyone. So that more specific around the sight loss, I think it's worth reminding your client to think about their background. And are they okay to make sure that it is clear and tidy? Somebody might think it's tidy, but actually it's not. And there's I know earlier on today I had a tray on the table behind me with my dirty breakfast dishes, and when I became aware of that, I thought, that looks a bit off. Certainly wouldn't want that, to be the case if I had an interview going on. So yeah, are they able to make sure things are clear and tidy in the background? And then we need to think about posters or artwork that's also on the walls behind us, and are they things that would be appropriate to an interview setting? And how do they reflect on the client? Because I think with video calls, your interviewer is getting a real look into what's behind the person, quite literally. So I think it's important about seeing what this says about me as a person. So your client with sight loss may not really have thought about these things before. So definitely worth reminding them. Of course, you'll need to, make sure your client's thinking about the equipment that they need and how they're going to set it all up. And, that would include like the layout of the room. Do they have a table? Would they need a table to put a laptop on? Have they got a comfortable chair to sit in? And somebody mentioned earlier about the lighting. I'm aware that in my living room here, while I've closed the curtains to my right, I have a little door behind me and there's no curtain on that. And I think my face is a similar colour to Helen's t-shirt today. I was kind of conscious of that. So yeah, lighting, it might not be, it could be about how it is from a cosmetic point of view, but also is it comfortable lighting for your client with sight loss? Somebody might be particularly light sensitive. They might struggle if it's darker. So, is that room the best place for them to be conducting their interview in relation to the lighting? And another thing that you might need to speak to someone about is, if they're likely to have any tests as part of the interview. Is there a test included in the interview, and how's that going to be done? So you might be thinking about, how accessible the text, any tests might be via video link. And, would your client be able to do this? Or would perhaps, if they were asked to read information on screen, perhaps could that be sent out to them in advance so that they're not having to juggle too many things that are problematic in relation to their sight loss? Again, there could be difficulties if perhaps it's a group, a group interview, or if there's, sharing of screens can be a big problem for lots of people, because if I have my own screen, I can adjust that to how I want it to be. If I'm looking at someone else's shared screen and they're jumping around with their mouse everywhere, I might find that difficult to keep track of what's happening. So, sharing screens could be a real problem for me. So again, that's okay. Hi, Sylvia. Think about these types of things, and perhaps what adjustments could be put into place for that. And again, I think somebody mentioned in the chat ideas earlier about, where someone is in relation to the camera. So I'm quite low in my picture, so there's a big space up here. I've seen people over to this side, or maybe half on the screen, or the top of the head, or a lovely view up somebody's nose and things like this. So, it's where is your camera? How does it sit? And are you in the, centrally, fitting into the camera's view nicely? Sometimes people may not know where the camera is on their device. So I've known of people to use a little sticker, a brightly coloured sticker that they can see, and it reminds them where the camera is. Somebody had a little tactile sticker because they had very low vision and weren't able to see the colour, a coloured sticker. So they used a tactile marker, so they knew whereabouts on their device the camera actually is, to help them be facing towards it. Very good suggestion somebody made was about a practice session, and I think the important things there, it's distinct from doing a mock interview. The practice of this is actually, making sure that there's a good connection, making sure the person's positioned rightly, the background image, all of these things. So the things you would think of specifically because it's a video call. Maybe a friend could help your client with getting this set up, helping them make sure they have the right connections and the right apps. And a point I think worth mentioning, a lot of my customers have said that they find using video conferencing on their phone a lot easier and more accessible than perhaps using a laptop or a computer. Trying different devices to see what suits somebody best. But phones and tablets seem to be, the preferred for people with sight loss when it comes to accessibility. So just to give you an example of a time when it went wrong, because I like times when it goes wrong because we can learn from that. And I have a friend who formerly worked in our team. He was going for a job interview, and it was the first time he'd used Teams. So he's using it from home, and his internet browser is Chrome. And he didn't realise that Teams and Chrome don't work well together. So he arrived for his interview, and he waited and he waited. And after about 10 minutes, he started to think, have they forgotten I'm here? And didn't really know what to do. There was no error message or anything that came up to let him know. And he was just left waiting. So after 20 minutes, he called, he called somebody who put him in touch with the interviewer, and they were similarly waiting for him to arrive. So I think the practice run of things to make sure not just our own connection, but that things are compatible. Yes, Apple computers are very different as well, Ithrin has mentioned. So, yeah. Being aware that sometimes the browser you use might not work so well with the video platform. So, a practice run would definitely have, flagged up that there was something not right there. I think as well, just like with any interview, it's helpful for your client to know who's interviewing them and what their job role is, and that would apply in a face-to-face interview too, I think. It can be helpful also to know how many people are on the interview panel on the video call as well, and who they are and what their jobs are, because suddenly this extra person you didn't know was there pipes up is like, oh. So it's nice to know who the panel consists of and who they are. And I think the only probably other thing I would mention here is this backup plan idea. And does your client have the details to join the call to hand? And more importantly, do they know how to get back into the video meeting if they lost their connection? So, you know, if perhaps you do have someone come into your office to do the meeting, to do their interview, and you've set everything up for them, you know, be close by just in case they lose their connection and they need to get back in again. Do they have a contact number for the interviewer? Just as my friend, colleague I mentioned, he had to contact someone else to get in touch with him. It might have been a bit better had he had a number to get in touch with him when something went wrong. And I think also, even though it's all set up as a video call, it's probably worthwhile your client making sure that the interviewer has their number, just in case something does go wrong. And of course, making sure that wherever you are, you've got a good phone signal as well. Because if you can't get on video call and then they can't reach you on because you've not got a phone signal, then it's not so good. So yeah, that was a lot of information there. So in preparing for the interview, I think there's lots of things to think of. And I'm glad that in our little chat function earlier, we had, I think we pretty much mentioned all of these things. So we're all definitely thinking along the right lines here. So if we could move on to the next slide. Thank you, Helen. So, yep, just really about, you know, with the equipment side of things, some things to remember is, you know, has your client charged their phone or their laptop? Is it fully charged, ready? Remind them to keep their charger for the phone or the laptop handy, particularly phone, you know, it can, the battery can go down quite quickly and we don't want to be rummaging around looking for a charger that's perhaps in another room. We need it nice and handy. Is your client going to take notes during the interview if the employer is happy for them to do that? If they are they going to use a voice recorder or are they going to use their phone to do this? And just really to remind them, if they are going to use their phone as a note taker, to put it on silent, because the last thing we want is somebody starts to ring them to see how the interview is going while they're in the middle of doing it. So just a couple of little pointers for the equipment side of things. So just to give everyone a rest from listening to me for a minute, I just wondered, you know, there was a lot of information in that last couple of sections, and I just wondered if people had thoughts or ideas or, you know, any comments that they wanted to put into the chat function at the moment. Have there been things that perhaps you might not have thought of? Are there other things that you have thought of that maybe I haven't thought of? What do people think around this?
Right, we'll just give everyone a moment to
pop
things into the chat. I think there's been some interesting points, hasn't there? And I think one of the challenges, like we've said, is different platforms and different hardware changes everything, doesn't it? You can be using Zoom, but it feels different in Macs and in Windows devices.
Yeah, absolutely does. So.
And tablets and phones feel very different again, don't they? Because it's harder to follow. Right, here we go. So Hannah says it's good to have support from family and friends as you're using a phone. Sometimes the image shows differently to what the interviewer is seeing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
definitely.
I know I'm aware that on our call today, my camera is up here, whereas I'm looking at my screen. So it's, yeah, I'm not looking at the camera. You know, so there's, depending on the positioning of your camera and your device, things can be a little bit different, can't they? So yeah,
excellent. And definitely Julie has said she thought it was great to understand about how light can impact on the person with sight loss. She hadn't considered that, and we've talked a lot in different sessions about having that light in, so your face lights up so the interviewers can see you, but actually, you know, we'd not thought about the impact that could have on someone who it could impact even more on their sight loss. So
yeah, of course,
useful.
Yeah, and you know, lots of people, as we've, you know, talked about previously, as you say, Helen, lots of people have different requirements in relation to light, and some people need lots of light, some which could be overwhelming for the interviewer, you know, and it's but whereas some people need quite dim light, so it could appear very dark and dingy. So it's you know, it's about being comfortable, but being able to function as well, isn't it? And how that appears, because, you know, this is an introduction to, you know, the interviewer is meeting you for the first time, and, you know, and we are, when we meet someone, we do tend to, we have a look to see what books they've got on their bookshelf, and all these, you know, unconscious kind of judgments that we're making, you know, so, you know, we're only human, so that, you know, wondering, why are you sitting in the dark with all the curtains drawn, and it just seems a bit odd, but
and I guess the importance of this then is the communication, isn't it? It's actually saying, this is the reason, so this person can interact properly. Yep, these are going to be the settings, so it doesn't come across as strange. It's anticipated, and it's a workaround.
Yep, that's it. Absolutely. So yeah.
We've had a comment from Lisa who says it really is understanding how someone is set up at home and try and make the interview as accessible as possible. So we must have that awareness.
Yeah, that's it. Absolutely. So, okay, thank you. So if we could move on to the next slide, please, Helen. Thanks. So yeah. You know, a lot of this stuff, it just applies, the guidelines here apply to everyone and anyone, and not just people with sight loss. You know, the interview should be treated in the same way as if you were attending in person, and all the interview etiquette needs to be followed by both parties, and, you know, should be carried out in a professional manner. Of course it should. So, you know, we've talked about the interview room, and, you know, should have all that set up prior to the interview, just as we've spoken about earlier. Dress code, you know, remind your client to think about the way they dress for the interview, and just because we're at home, it's not an excuse not to make the same effort. And I think for an interview, you know, recruiting managers would be expecting you to make the same effort as if you were going into the office and attending in person. So the usual rules, you know, apply. Make sure you got your outfit ready, make sure you look smart, and just really remember that, you know, you want to make a good first impression. And, you know, similarly, body language. Just as any other interview, it's important to think about our posture. If you're slumped in a chair, it doesn't look good. And, you know, remind your client that they are on camera, you know, so people can see them, their body language, their facial expressions, their gestures. And I think you know, the key is to smile and be upbeat, just as we would in a face-to-face interview. So on the actual interview itself, so joining the call. Just because we're at home, let's not arrive late. You know, remind them to be aware of their timekeeping. They do need to be ready for the call early, and they may not be able to get into the interview until the host arrives, but they still need to be ready and waiting. So you know, your client can check in advance that they've got the link for the meeting ready, they've double checked the right time for the interview, they've got the names of who's going to be interviewing them, and that crucial telephone number to hand, just in case they do lose their connection and can't get back in again. I think that shows someone's resourceful, you know, if that should happen, and then they call and say, I've lost my connection, here I am again. That in itself doesn't reflect badly on the person that they've lost their connection, but it says a lot when they have that plan B backup. So I think that's important. And then, you know, concluding the interview, if your client's got any questions to ask, it's advisable to wait till the end of the call to ask these. They'll probably be invited to do that, as they would in any interview. And, you know, just remind them to have a note of their questions in whatever format they would be using, to note these down, and to just keep their questions clear and concise. And ending the call, once the, you know, questions have been asked and answered, the call's at an end, so it's really just time to thank the employer for the time and allow a few seconds before you end the call. The interviewers might stay in the call, so that, you know, they'll be looking for your client to exit the call, and that's that. So I think something that I would always remind clients as well is that any interview is really nerve-wracking. And a video interview can be so much more so, because of all the additional things we worry about which could go wrong. And they're not really additional things, they're different things. You know, if it's a face-to-face interview, you worry about what if the bus doesn't come? What if the train's late? You know, what if my taxi's held up or what have you? So it's just different things that we're worried about, but it seems more so because they're new things that we never used to have to think about. So I think it's good to remind your client that they've come this far and they've secured the interview in the first place. So the employer is obviously impressed by their skills and their experience. And the good thing about being interviewed at home is that it can give you more time to prepare, and you can also create your own setting that's more comfortable and suits your needs. So there's lots of positives about having, you know, virtual interviews from home as well. So just on to the next slide, please, Helen. So, yep, so we have lots of further resources for employment professionals on our website and a whole series of useful fact sheets on all sorts of topics. So we have looking for work, we have interview skills, we've got a fact sheet about tests at interviews, and you know, a more recent one that's been introduced is how to shine in a virtual interview. So really everything we've spoken about today and lots more are available on our website in these fact sheets. You can download the fact sheets free of charge from our website, and you know, you can also send them on to your customers, people who have sight loss, assured that the information on them is going to be accessible to them. So just on to the next slide as well, please, Helen. And yeah, so this is really just I suppose I wanted to ask if anyone had any comments or questions before we finish. We could maybe do that through chat again, if that's okay.
Absolutely, yes. So if anyone does have any questions, while I'm giving everyone a moment to type those in, I've got a question for you. So sorry for putting you on the spot a little bit here, Heather. What are the most common concerns that you're hearing from people with sight loss around attending virtual interviews?
Okay, I think probably the same fear that everyone has. What if my connection goes wrong, or you know, something just goes wrong on the day? Like our concerns today, Helen, we've been concerned we may have a Amazon or whatever delivery arrive in the middle of it, you know. Obviously you try not to have that happen, but sometimes the door goes, you know. But I think it's you know, people just fear the fact it's a video thing. What if I can't get on? What if I lose my connection? What if it's stuttering and stammering? Just my connectivity is not good. And I think too with you know, platforms, we've said this, there's so many different platforms. I've been to meetings where I was expected to deliver something and the platform, I just couldn't get into it. And I had done a trial run of it. And for some reason on the day I couldn't. And it was, you know, you just feel like a complete fool. Like, they think I'm just not prepared. And the same would apply in an interview. So I think, you know, they are the same fears that anyone would have of if something goes wrong. So by, you know, putting in the preparation, just as you would with any interview, you're not going to go to an interview without having read through, you know, what's involved and what the job's about and what's expected of you on the day. You're going to prepare for that regardless. And I think the message is the same with virtual interviews. What we need to do is a little bit different, but you know, I think being aware that you know, the interviewer, it could go wrong for them, their connection could go, and we've all experienced this. So there's probably the same fears on their part as there are on ours, and just having that backup plan of, if nothing else works, if I've got a telephone number that I can call them and then continue the you know, the interview that way. So so yeah, I think it's the same concerns for people with sight loss as it would be for anyone else. What if something just doesn't go right on the day? So okay. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you for that. So, and it is a challenge, isn't it, with that? So typically, I'm going to leave you to talk for a second because
there's your delivery. So okay then. So okay, so yeah. Thank you, everyone. I'll just let you know briefly about our next webinar if you're able to come along. So that's on the 9th of June, and that'll be the 5th in our RNIB Seeing Opportunities series. And what we'll be talking about that day is about engaging with employers. So I'd like to introduce our job retention service and our work with employers of people with sight loss. And I think that might be particularly useful to people who perhaps if your job is about helping someone get into work, that's half the battle and a big part of the battle, but often the other part of it is how do we keep them there? What if problems start once they're already in the job? You might provide in-work support. I could tell you how we could support you to do that. So, yeah, it's the next session will be about how, you know, RNIB employment advisors would perhaps work with employers around keeping people in their jobs. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Heather. I've got my delivery now, so you filled in lovely for me. Thank you for that. No, I'm just thinking, I was just about to say it when my doorbell went, and obviously we've been talking all session about making sure there's someone else there to answer the door, but you know, we've got through it and it's fine. For those of you, I know we've got a few new people attending today who haven't attended before, and we've been talking a lot about using platforms and different technology. If you go over to the IEP YouTube channel, we've had previous sessions with Heather where she's looked at assistive technology with us, and there was some content in there around using hardware and software. So there'll be some interesting stuff that you can use as well to help your participants engage and use that software. So there is some additional content there in order to support you with that. So I just thought it was worth saying that. And we've also got some sessions. I think our earliest session was around an introduction to the different types of sight loss and what that might look like. And again, I think that would really help people understand what participants might be seeing on the screen and how they can support them with that moving forward. Yeah.
I think to the on the screen just now we have the RNIB helpline number and email address, and yeah, and, you know, and our website www.rnib.org.uk, there's so much information that's there that would be useful, but also, you know, don't be scared to email the helpline or to phone them. They're not just there for blind customers, you know, they're there for anyone who has an interest in the world of sight loss. No question's a daft question, you know, and they will, you know, put you onto the right team or department, or if, you know, if they can answer your query directly, they might send you, you know, if you're looking for a fact sheet about something, they can send you that. So it's a really, really good, I like it, not just because I work here, but I find the RNIB helpline it's a really valuable resource, and it's there for everyone. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Heather. I've got lots of comments coming in from Jane, Bryony, Sam, Shahina and Lisa saying thank you, Heather. It's been a really informative and helpful session, as all of the sessions with you have been. So thank you for that. I'm looking forward to the next one. For those of you who haven't received the Learning Network Bulletin, or just to remind you all, we do this every Wednesday at the same time, although we try not to get deliveries every Wednesday at the same time. Next week, we're joined by the Good Employability Company, and we're going to have a really interesting session around what do we know about advice that works, and we're going to be looking at the worldwide evidence. So we'll be looking at the data that backs up advice that works for our participants. So if you can join us, please do. It's going to be a great session. We're joined by David from Good Employability Company. If you can't, hop over onto the IEP YouTube channel and hit subscribe, and you will then be notified of all of these sessions because we do share them. So thank you once again. Massive thank you to Heather. Always a pleasure to work with you. And a massive thank you to everyone who spent their lunch with us today. And I look forward to seeing you at the next session.
And thank you, Helen, as always, for your help with making sure this runs smoothly. That's invaluable to me. So
my absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, right. Take care. Bye-bye.
I can just see, Heather, while people are leaving,
yeah.
Kirsty has said, thank you for raising my awareness around issues and resources. Coincidentally, my summer RNIB raffle draw tickets came through my letterbox while on the call.
Oh, well.
Let's hope that that's an omen that she's got some winning raffle tickets.
Oh, I think so, yeah. Yeah, definitely get them out there.
That's absolutely fantastic, isn't it? Yeah, I really can't believe that I have stopped the recording. I cannot believe that literally as I started to do my closing, the door went ding dong.
Do you know, you were so quick. You were gone and back in seconds, you know, so it's, yeah. I think it would have been more disruptive if it had been mine, because the dog would have barked for on and on and on, but she's actually fast asleep, so.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
Okay then, right, well
I will leave you in peace. I hope your delivery comes soon and you're freed up for the rest of your day.
Oh, I will be, and I'll put together my thoughts of future sessions then, and we'll look at this 11th of August as the follow on. We've got next month, and then after that, I've got 2 or 3 ideas of other things, and of course, if there's anything that you think of, or IEP members particularly would want something, even if it's a refresher that's not covered by watching the recording kind of thing. So I'm happy to do these. It works good for me.
Yeah, it's great, and it's getting the message out there, isn't it? So you can look at that.
Okay, right.
Thanks, Heather. Enjoy it. Good luck with your move. If I won't speak to you before your move.
I know, yeah. So I will let you know. I'll let you know how it goes, and I hope you get a week at the seaside. That sounds lovely.
Well, it does sound nice, doesn't it? Yeah, and I could get away without packing boxes if I'm really careful, couldn't I?
Yeah, I'll see. Yeah.
That's what I have to do.
Okay then. Right.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.